Lane Kiffin needs a blowout against the Kentucky Wildcats, and his actions show he believes that too.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast around. I'm your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member as well. On today's show, we will break down Ole Miss versus the Kentucky Wildcats. Mark Stoops has built his team into a program on turning games into rock fights. I'll explain why last year's matchup was such a grind and why this year could be a little bit different. Then we'll talk about the key differences between Austin Simmons and Jaxson Dart and what will become and why you may not want Austin Simmons to change too much. But first, Lane Kiffin dropped a little nugget this week. Ole Miss has been working on Kentucky all offseason. That tells me that Kiffin knows that he has to blow out the Kentucky Wildcats this weekend, and to win an SEC championship, that probably needs to happen as well. Will he? Recent history says no, and Kentucky has definitely had Jaxson Dart's number, but there's a reason why a blowout may be in order this year. We'll explain all of that and more right now on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the everydayers who make this show what it is, and that is the most fun way to follow Ole Miss sports. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is right around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets right now. So, really interesting stuff. You have the Kentucky Wildcats this weekend. We don't need to rehash what happened. We understand that Ole Miss lost a game against Kentucky. The Ole Miss and 7 Kentucky Wildcats of 2024 after Mark Stoops flirted with Texas A&M, the whole 9 yards. That was a season to forget. And because of that, Lane Kiffin mentioned in his press gathering Sunday night how much it sucked and how many things had to go against Ole Miss in that game to lose that game. And then when you look at the box score, you can kind of see how Kentucky was able to control some stuff. And the way they played against Lane Kiffin, it made it seem like Mark Stoops has Lane Kiffin's number. That is why Lane Kiffin is putting so much effort into the offseason this year on the Kentucky Wildcats. In his press gathering, Lane Kiffin on Playing Kentucky, we spent a lot of time in the offseason on these guys, and hopefully that will help. The last time that Ole Miss spent an inordinate amount of time on a team was last year in the Georgia Bulldogs. And let's be honest, Ole Miss kind of took Georgia to the woodshed in that game. If you look at the Arkansas game, Ole Miss put 63 points in Fayetteville. Lane Kiffin's places that he wanted to win that were difficult, that they put extra effort in, they kind of blew both of those teams out. So this is probably bad news for the Kentucky Wildcats, honestly. Lane Kiffin knows that this game, above most every other game, is special this year because of what it could mean. Now, when you look at Ole Miss played Kentucky in 2020, it was a close game. 2022, it was a close game. 2024, it was a close game. Maybe if you play a game in an odd year, it's not so much a close game. But I think the way that Jaxson Dart was playing quarterback for Ole Miss in 2022 and 2024 played into Mark Stoops and Kentucky's defensive hand. They knew what he wanted to do. They knew all of that stuff. I'm not saying anything bad about Jaxson. I'm saying that was a matchup problem for him from the jump. Kentucky sat back, played sink coverage, dared him to throw the ball underneath. He kept trying to force it down the field. We always talked about the duck and chuck, and that kind of played into the Kentucky Wildcats' hand. When you look at what they did offensively, one coverage bust led to a 4th and 7 conversion that ended up being the winning touchdown in that game and keeping Ole Miss out of the playoffs. Lane Kiffin is aware of how important this game is for this season and how you can make things either better or worse by how you do this game. If you lose to Kentucky, you're not going to the playoffs. You're going to the Duke's Mayo Bowl. You're going to the Liberty Bowl. It's not where you want to be. In order for you to accomplish every single one of your goals, this game is a must win. We talked about in the offseason, Ole Miss needed to be 6-0 heading to Athens for the playoffs to be a realistic possibility. Ole Miss needs to beat Kentucky. They need to beat Arkansas. They need to beat Tulane. They need to beat LSU, who looks really good, by the way. They need to beat Washington State. If Ole Miss is 6-0 at the turn, Ole Miss in the playoffs conversation can begin in earnest. And judging by what we saw against Georgia State, it kind of plays perfectly in being able to take apart this Kentucky defense. Now, they're good. No, don't get me wrong. Mark Stoops can coach some defense, man. That is just what he does. The next head coach at Iowa, Mark Stoops, can coach a bunch of defense. That's shocking. Kentucky has a bad offense. The next coach at Iowa has a bad offense, and I'm sure he has an absolute fantastic punter. But when you look at what Ole Miss has offensively, it's pretty easy to see the roadmap for Ole Miss to being successful against Kentucky and against Arkansas. And that is variety at wide receiver, variety at running back. It's not so much based around one player. Last year, Tre Harris caught 11 passes for like 170 yards. The rest of the receivers had like 70 yards total. I think Jaxson Dart threw for 260 yards or something around that. There was no running game to really speak of. They had trouble moving people on the line of scrimmage, and you're going to have trouble with them this year. I'm telling you, Kentucky's defense is legit. But what Ole Miss does offensively may be Kentucky's kryptonite. They want you to force it downfield. They need you to get impatient. We talk about Mark Stoops and his propensity for setting up rock fights in football. That can be avoided by getting first downs and moving the chain. You get a 14-point lead in the game, it looks completely different. Look at what South Carolina did to Kentucky a year ago in Lexington. I think they beat them 34-0 or something like that. They beat them down pretty good. Now, but Georgia didn't have that patience, and it was a 13-12 game. That was the game the week before Ole Miss and Kentucky played. And the other thing that went wrong in that game a year ago is the fact that Ole Miss played 4 nobodies to get ready for SEC play, and they weren't physically ready for the challenge by the time that game started. They got hit in the mouth, and it's like Mike Tyson says, everybody has a plan until you get hit in the mouth. Lane Kiffin knows this game has to be a blowout to set a statement about the Lane Kiffin Revenge Tour 2025 that is underway, to let the SEC know and put them on notice that Ole Miss is here and they need to be taken care of. They need to be feared. Ole Miss is a legit candidate to go. I saw Chris Gordy's power rankings from Locked On SEC. He had Ole Miss number 12. His justification for that is you played a cupcake in week 1. That's fine, but you had him behind Alabama. Ole Miss and Missouri just hanging back. John Miller at Locked On Mizzou and me, we are a fraternity in the SEC of disrespect. Everybody loves to disrespect Ole Miss and Missouri. Chris Gordy is no different. And since LSU won a game, all of a sudden LSU's going number 1, and LSU and Ole Miss, you know how that goes. But we will jump off that bridge when the time comes, because if Ole Miss takes care of business and LSU takes care of business, game day will be in the Grove for that game. Listen, Lane Kiffin needs all of this to happen. And for any of it to happen, it requires a blowout Saturday in Lexington. Is it going to be hard? Yes, absolutely. Is it going to be guaranteed? No, it's not. You can look at the past box scores to see that. Is it something that is absolutely possible? Yes, it absolutely is. And it comes from Harrison Wallace and Deshaun Stribling and Daquan Wright and Caleb Odom, who had a good game, the tight end usage that Ole Miss used against Georgia State. If they do that against Kentucky, you can open up that defense a little bit better, and you have a legit running back room to run behind. Now, everybody has questions about the offensive line. This is a real test for them. If Ole Miss runs the ball pretty well, has time to throw the football, all of that goes on, this offensive line is going to be fine, because if you remember a year ago, this offensive line just bullied Ole Miss and what was going on there. So we'll see about that. Anyway, Austin Simmons looks like he was built in a lab for this Lane Kiffin offense, but don't expect it to look the same as it did with Jaxson Dart a year ago. The approach will be different, and that is not a bad thing for this Ole Miss attack. We'll break all that down next. Stick around. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get the crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from most of the trusted brands in the nation. It's there for you. Their real-time inventory and honest lead time help keep you from punting on projects. So while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side cover, that's a football reference, and if you need parts for a project, Supply House has the next day delivery. Talk about a game changer. The part finder tools and 3D schematics can save you hours on jobs where every detail matters. Their Trademaster perks like priority shipping and a dedicated support line make the whole process even smoother as well. Join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use the code SHCollege5, all one word, SHCollege5, for 5% off your first order. That's Supply House, real people, real service. Guys, you probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you are looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rougiette Ready. Rougiette Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost a little blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rougiette's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast. On average, about 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours as well, so you can stay confident and control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rougiette might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. I love that it is completely online. Rougiette connects you with a board-certified doctor and ships your treatment discreetly to your door. You can even read real customer reviews on their site. It's helping a lot of people feel more confident and present in the moment. So head to Rougiette.com/LockedOnCollege and use the code LockedOnCollege, all one word, to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnCollege and use the promo code LockedOnCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Visit the Rougiette website for full safety instructions. We have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you. We put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to the LockedOnPodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes the survey will be entered to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that is LockedOnPodcast.com/survey. You can also find the link below in the show notes. Thank you so much for helping us out. Also, do us a favor and like, subscribe, and comment on the video. Subscribe to the podcast on whatever audio podcatcher you are on and give it a 5-star review. It costs absolutely nothing, but keeps all of this free. And if you want more, join the Insiders program in the subtext link down below. No trolls, 14-day free trial, and the easiest way ever to cancel. So give it a try. And don't forget to check out a second listen on the network. Nearly every team, college or pro, is at your fingertips. Now, this is really interesting because I wanted to kind of talk about last year's Kentucky game a little bit and mention the differences that Austin Simmons and Jaxson Dart and all of that. And in the middle of that, I discovered a little bit something different. So if you look at Austin Simmons, and this is his zones that he had against Georgia State. I mean, a perfectly fine zone, but you can see there was not many passes more than 20 yards downfield. He did have the 47-yarder to Harrison Wallace. Not as a lot of passes from 10 to 20 yards downfield, but a ton of passes between 0 and 10 yards. He was 1 or 2 out to the left. There was a drop pass on that one. He was a near 12 of 13 for 146 yards and a touchdown in the middle, and he was 1 for 1 out to the right as well. All stuff that you would expect of a young quarterback, but I think it is more than that. I think Austin Simmons, his processing ability that he has is going to cause him to get the ball out a little bit quicker. So routes that are normally 10 to 15 yards routes, you're getting the ball at 7 yards. So inside the numbers, 12 of 13, 146 yards and a touchdown, I think he's going to be doing some work in that part of the field, especially if you sink back deep. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Now, just to look at what's going on, Jaxson Dart's zone from the same time frame, just to give you the look of the differences of it, much more deep passes percentage-wise. Now, this is his senior year, I guess you can say, in 2024. So it's going to look a little bit different than Austin Simmons. It is. But I just wanted you to see what the offense running at the highest level looks like with Jaxson Dart and what we've seen so far from Austin Simmons. You can see 10 to 20 yards downfield, there's a lot of action in that area. And then Austin Simmons, more of the action is between 0 and 10 yards. Now, my theory is Kentucky was able to control Jaxson Dart in both games against Ole Miss in 2022 and 2024 by sinking a little bit, keeping everything in front. Don't get beaten by explosive plays. And Mark Stoops does a fantastic job of making the team drive the ball down the field. No explosives. All of the stuff is what you would hope it to happen. And because of that, you end up forcing the ball downfield to Tre Harris. Tre Harris ended up with 174 yards. I do not think, and we did not see a Tre Harris-like thing in this Georgia State game. Austin Simmons did a really good job of spreading the ball around the field between Harris and Wallace. Deshaun Stribling had 3 catches as well. Then you look at the tight ends, Daquan Wright and Caleb Odom. They were big participants as well. The running backs didn't catch any balls either, so we'll see exactly what that looks like. But you can see the sink that Mark Stoops plays, why that wasn't the best matchup for a Jaxson Dart. Now, the ball getting out a little bit quicker before you can sink, I think the quarterback in Austin Simmons has a chance to be really effective. And one thing that I saw when we were looking at this is the Matt Corral numbers from 2021. When he was a senior, this is after he had Elijah Moore. North of 20 yards downfield, didn't throw very often. Jaxson threw a ton down the field, but Matt Corral was a little bit more judicious. He was more judicious from 10 to 20 yards as well. And then you look at those 0 to 10 yards, the quick decisions that Matt Corral made, that is the reason they were so effective offensively. And if you look at it, we're going to bring up some box scores in segment 3 that might have played a big role in being successful against the Mark Stoops defense. It's something we should keep an eye on absolutely to see exactly how that goes. Listen, you want a rock fight. He wants a rock fight. The whole thing wants a rock fight. The way you get out of rock fights is by moving the football, keeping their offense off the field to where they can't drain clock. wear out the defense a little bit, do some stuff that they weren't expecting, and get a lead. If you can get up by 2 scores, if you're leaving at that point. 2 scores can turn into 4 scores really quick when you're playing against a team like this. But if it is an absolute rock fight, which Mark Stoops is known for trying to create, you have to be a little bit careful of what can go on because, I mean, they do some pretty cool stuff, but they do not have the best players in the world. So in our final segment, Mark Stoops is desperate to drag this matchup into a rock fight. It's the only way Kentucky can get what they want. That's the way they got it a year ago. But how exactly do they try to do that? More importantly, how can Austin Simmons and the Ole Miss offense keep from getting dragged down into that style of a game? We'll break that all down next. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss option. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets. Bet $5, get $300? Yes, please. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, building the same game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. So, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app today now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. College football is back, and I could not be much more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing quite like it. Let's be real. Actually, getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time. It's the app that gives you the advantage and gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I pulled up Game Time just to check the prices around Lexington, and you can get into the game for a really good price right now. So how about that? So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. You know, what Lane Kiffin has been unable to do in games over the last couple of years with Kentucky is avoid getting into a rock fight. The game in 2022 got completely bogged down, ended up being a 3-point game. Kentucky almost won that at the end. In 2024, we all know what happened, but the rock fight was created. Lane Kiffin has struggled to avoid doing that. And it is Mark Stoops' preferred method of playing football, and it's bizarre to make a football game feel like a trip to the dentist, honestly, for the other team. He wants to control the clock, make the game increasingly short to the point where the other team panics a little bit and plays into his hands by trying to make explosives to get the 14-point touchdown because this just isn't quite going right. This game, and Mark Stoops does a really good job of making you beat yourself and playing directly into his hands. How do you avoid that? How do you move on to the next level? Because this is the first question this week that we're going to go over about Ole Miss football and where they could end up. You need to avoid the rock fight as much as humanly possible. When you look at the last 2 games, it's interesting to me. These are the last 2 games, both started by Jaxson Dart. Not really talking about Jaxson Dart, just mentioned that it was that recent. In 2024, Kentucky won 20-17. The biggest stat in that game was Tre Harris catching 11 passes for 176 yards. They were forcing the ball down the field. They were ducking Chuck. All of the stuff that Kentucky was prepared for, Ole Miss didn't have the patience to do. Ole Miss freaked out in that game. They started trying to score those 14-point touchdowns. And once Ole Miss freaked out because of the expectations that they had going into that game, it just played directly into Kentucky's hands. But this isn't the only time that has happened. This isn't a new thing. If you go back to 2022, game also in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium, Ole Miss won 22-19 in that game. And in that game, Ole Miss needed a sack-cost fumble at the very end to prevent something weird from happening. Kentucky was going down in field goal range to tie the game up. That game was probably headed to overtime if it makes it. In 2024, it was a missed field goal at the end, or that game was headed to overtime. Rock fights are just the norm and what you can expect from Kentucky, right? Not necessarily the case. During my research of what was going on, I made the discovery that as far as stylistic playing, Austin Simmons is closer to Matt Corral than he is to Jaxson Dart as far as how he plays the position of quarterback. A lot more stuff downfield with Jaxson Dart. Austin Simmons is very quick. Get the ball out of your hand. Keep it moving. Move the chains. He's not the runner that Matt Corral was, but in the passing game, it was very similar. In 2020, Ole Miss went up to Lexington, Kentucky as well. And this was a very interesting thing. Ole Miss won the game 42-41 in overtime, another close game. Ole Miss did not have a defense that year, and Kentucky had a much better offensive team that year. But a missed extra point allowed Ole Miss to win the game. That's not the point. Ole Miss scored 42 points on Mark Stoops that night or that day. Matt Corral was 24 of 29, 320 yards and 4 touchdowns in that game. It doesn't have to be a rock fight, is my point. If you go up there and move the chains and can score touchdowns, you can make this pressure go from you over to Kentucky, because if you get a lead, Kentucky offensively is going to panic a little bit, and they're going to have to do some stuff that they are not prepared to do. I think Matt Corral and Austin Simmons stylistically play the quarterback position in a similar way. And I think some quick stuff to the tight end. You're not going to be force feeding somebody like Tre Harris, but you have weapons on the outside like Harrison Wallace and Deshaun Stribling and Caden Lee. There's so many different things that Ole Miss can do and open up the Kentucky defense. The jet sweep coming back, I am very much in favor of that. But you can see how to avoid the rock fight that Mark Stoops in Kentucky so desperately wants. And you know what? I think they will. I think the blowout is coming. The pick is going to be a little bit later in the week, but I feel pretty good about where Ole Miss sits right now. Thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we are the front door of Ole Miss. So don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. It helps the show, and it is totally free. Your support means the world to us. And in another big moment for Locked On college football fans, Locked On and Fire TV are presenting College Football Kickoff, your ultimate college football weekly preview. Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12 leads the conversation alongside two-time AP Coach of the Year Gary Patterson and former college star Jesse Holley and Locked On's local experts, right? A local college football preview that only Locked On can do. Catch College Football Kickoff every Thursday throughout the season, only on Fire TV. Hotty toddy, everybody. Remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.